Bert, your turn.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session of the SME Assembly on maintaining business afloat in times of crisis. My name is Bert Kuby. I'm heading the Economic Policy Unit at the European Committee of Regions, and I'm very pleased to be here with you to moderate this session. The session, which is about a very important, crucial topic, economic crisis, SMEs suffer. How can you help them? How can we help them? And of course, we have a very distinguished panel here of speakers from EU-level institutions, European organizations, working with SMEs, working in support of SMEs. And I will introduce each one of them as and when they will speak. Some first announcement on technology that we use today. You will be able to raise questions, make comments, and you can write all this in the chat feed, which is nice next to the live stream window. And then we will see that we can get all your comments and questions responded. Unfortunately, you cannot yourself take the floor. Now to the theme of this session. Now we know that SMEs are the backbone of the economy, of Europe's economy. They're crucial for growth, employment, innovation. And now in this unprecedented economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, they're the ones that are hardest hit. And that are all across Europe. Together with self-employed workers and micro enterprises, SMEs are the most vulnerable of all to these effects of lockdowns. That's due to their size, of course. They're less resilient than larger businesses. And they have limited capital to sustain unusual periods of inactivity. So, of course, a large part of SMEs have liquidity problems as a consequence of the lockdowns. And these problems are getting more and more difficult with every additional day of lockdown. And that leads to an increasing risk of SMEs becoming insolvent. And because of the liquidity support measures increase the debt, indeed, insolvency becomes more and more risk. So it's therefore timely to look at what liquidity and solvency measures the EU has already put in place to keep businesses afloat, how they're being implemented, and what else is needed. And we will also have a little polling about this, so maybe we can sort of slowly start this polling, but we will also, next to these measures on liquidity and solvency, we will also look a little bit at what else is done for SMEs, notably to use early warning and intervention mechanisms to provide counseling advice, restructuring advice, indeed to prevent viable businesses to get into serious trouble, including insolvency. So maybe we can gradually now move to this polling. We'd like to run the polling with you, the audience. And this is about the following questions. Who do you think needs to do more to protect business from insolvency? And you have 3 questions to answer. So who is it you think that needs to do more to protect businesses from insolvency? Either it's the EU as an answer, the member states, or both. So you can choose one of the 3 in the poll that should be coming up soon. There's a pop-up screen that would appear, and then you're able to use your mouse and to click the bottom. And unfortunately, we cannot have the results immediately, but I think after the first speaker, we will have a brief look into these polling results. Can I get some feedback from the technicians? Is the polling there? Oh. Maybe it needs a little bit of time, so maybe we'll look into what's going to follow. We have 5 speakers today, and I will introduce them, but we also have two videos of SMEs that are going through the crisis right now. One is from Spain and one is from Denmark. Is there any feedback from polling? Otherwise, I would ask maybe to have the first video recorded from a testimony of a business affected by the crisis. Can we? Okay, so the polling is done. And I can say now the results.
Hi, my name is Esther Rivera. I'm the owner of Etapas Bar in the town center of Torremolinos, Spain. Torremolinos is one of the most touristic places in Spain, but it is also a low-cost destination in Europe due to the strong competence in hospitality. As you know, the first coronavirus outbreak in Spain was in March. Borders were closed and reopened in summer. Fortunately, the coronavirus transmission rates decreased. At that time, I suppose I could manage the situation, take advantage of summer period and recover my financial situation, but unfortunately some new outbreaks appear. Consequently, Spain was a risky country. I haven't had any international customer. People were afraid of infection and just I could use the terrace of my bar. I was receiving some public benefits until summer, around 661 euros monthly. I could pay a part of my business rent, amounting to 1,200 euros monthly, and pay my insurance, electricity, mortgage, and personal expenses with my personal savings. Honestly, I don't know how to overcome this crisis. I have tried to get a loan, but I haven't had any answer yet. Tourists are not coming at all. People are afraid of infection. And I need some help. I don't know what to do. My savings are run out and I have to close my bar next month.
Yes, thanks very much for this testimony of a small Spanish business. Maybe before we now turn to the first speaker, can I just quickly give the results of the polling? Thanks very much for everybody for taking part. Now, it was 3% who said EU should do more, 31% who said that the member state should do more, and 55% who said that both need to do more. So let me turn to Mr. Alain Alban Maggiar. You're the president of SME United, which is the Association of Crafts and SMEs in Europe. You're also heading the European Affairs Department at the French Confederation of Crafts, of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, sorry. Now, you've heard this quite desperate call and testimony of the French, of a Spanish entrepreneur, and you're listening probably to many entrepreneurs in France, but also across Europe. And you've done yourself recently, as with SME United, some surveys indicating that indeed 90% of SMEs are affected. And a recent report of you says that SME confidence is at its lowest. Now, as a spokesperson of SMEs across Europe, Alban, how bad is the situation really for SMEs? What are their key challenges now for survival and recovery And how good are liquidity and solvency measures put in place by the EU and member states? Can I ask you please to respond in 5 minutes to this? Thank you.
Yeah, well, I will do my best. I thank you for inviting me, and second for putting the question, which is the global question for Europe, how to keep business afloat in times of crisis. So I will do a presentation, a quick one in 3 parts. The first one is the present situation for SMEs. The second one is the suggestions we have, and the third one, which is a conclusion, would be the requests for four moves. So the present situations for SMEs is very difficult because, as you stated, the SME United surveys show that more and more SMEs are worried about their liquidity situation, and we've seen an example with what was said from Spain. And moreover, many experts project a sharp increase of insolvencies in the first part of next year. But there are significant differences between member states. For example, 80% of SMEs in Germany report no risk of a too heavy loan burden. On the other hand, already 47% of SMEs in my home countries, France, say that the survival of their company is potentially threatened. And the same is true for 52% of SMEs in Italy, and even for more in Spain. But as Mr. Breton stated in his introduction 1 hour ago, 90% of European SMEs have been impacted by the economic consequences of the pandemic. So therefore, we are grateful that governments took a variety of emergency measures to support liquidity and keep business alive. Maintaining these instruments as long as the restraining measures apply will be key for SMEs' survival. We also welcome the support for liquidity measures from the European institutions, such as the additional 1 billion guarantees from EFSI, the new possibilities made available with REACT-EU and the SURE initiative. The liquidity support contains fresh loan guarantees by the public sector in combination with postponement of tax and social security payments, as well as deferrals of interest payments for bank loans. So that was good. And this helped many SMEs to survive the crisis so far. Nevertheless, we have to be aware that all these measures increase the debt level of our SMEs and reduce their credit worthiness. And this means that even if these companies have a positive business outlook, they might face solvency problems as soon as they have to repay. And there I come to my second part, which are the, I would say, suggestive measures towards a near future. In order to help viable SMEs to survive and allow them to recover, recapitalization measures are decisive. These measures should be tailor-made and can include equity injections from private and public funds, subordinated loans, silent participation, etc. And a recent SME United survey shows classic solvency support instruments exist only in a few member states. Positively, some member states are preparing or at least considering such instruments. This is the reason why we strongly, once more, regret that the European Council rejected the idea of a European solvency support instrument in July. This could have provided the necessary incentive for member states to develop these urgently needed measures with the support of the European Union. Now, it is even more important that other European instruments like the InvestEU program and the new guarantee fund from the EIB facilitates solvency support measures. And I'm sure that Alain Godard will provide us with more details in a few minutes. In addition, we ask that solvency support instruments are part of the national recovery and resilience plans financed by Next Generation EU. SME United's national members will ask this from their governments. And today, I do invite all representatives from governments and public agencies to consider the creation of such instruments at national or regional level, and to do this in close cooperation with our SMEs associations. Finally, I would like to remind you that the provision of fresh money is a necessary condition to avoid insolvency, but it is not sufficient on its own. Therefore, we work with our partners from Early Warning Europe to ensure that adequate advice is accessible for entrepreneurs if their company encounters difficulties. Improving preventive measures and insolvency frameworks will be of key importance in Europe's recovery. We encourage policy makers to engage with stakeholders, especially SME organizations, to set up early warning mechanisms. Later on, I know that Morten Møller will give you and us more insight into the Early Warning Europe programs. And my conclusions are, requests and recommendations from our survey on SME solvency support instruments. Measures to ensure recapitalization of viable SMEs are a precondition for recovery. And we ask European and national policymakers, as I said, for major moves. The first one is to support equity and quasi-equity instruments by programs like InvestEU and other European funds. The second one, to include solvency support instruments in the national recovery and resilience plans. The third one, to provide tax incentives for private investments in SMEs, and a reduction of the debt equity bias in taxation of private companies. And the fourth one, to set up early warning mechanisms for SMEs in difficulties. As General de Gaulle would have put it, it's a vast program, and I'm looking forward to a fruitful debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alban. Maybe a quick question. I mean, you said that indeed in some countries risks are perceived lower by SMEs. You mentioned Germany, while in others, Spain, Italy, also France, the SMEs perceive their risk as much higher. Now, it's especially Germany that has put up the highest recovery plan and has the biggest surplus to allow the biggest firepower. Now, how is this working for SMEs in particular? I mean, is there not a distortion by the capacity of providing the assistance and to make these plans as you mentioned in your statement?
Well, I think
maybe a very short answer, because we need to.
Yes, it depends very much on the I would say national culture and the way that many SMEs are run. And as well, it depends on the links between those SMEs and the banks. That is to say, in Germany, for example, it is known that SMEs have much more fixed assets. That is to say, they have more capital, own reserves than in other countries. And in some countries, for example, in France, you have to think that they had to face two major things. That is to say, the yellow vests and then major strikes. So many SMEs came and faced the pandemic with almost a lack already of liquidity. And in some other countries, it's the fact that they were not so conscious of the fact that an SME needs to have liquidity and capital much more than they had the customs to do it. And so, I mean, you have differences, but you have major differences, I would say, in Germany, because there are traditional links between the SMEs and regional or local banks that have disappeared in many other countries.
Thanks very much, Alban. Now turning to Alain Godard, you're the Chief Executive of the European Investment Bank, and you've been with the EIB Group for several years. You're one of the designers or co-designers of the European Investment Plan and the European Fund for Strategic Investment, and you've also been involved in its implementation. Now, could you tell us a bit what are the measures that have now been put in place? How are they functioning? I mean, to support SMEs in these consequences of this economic crisis.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me today. Maybe just to be correct, I'm the CEO of the European Investment Fund and not European Investment Bank, but I would be happy to provide comments also from an EIB Group perspective. As we have seen very well from the video that has been provided earlier, we have seen that the first lockdown has generated, as we know, a big liquidity crisis for most of the SMEs. And the first response to this liquidity crisis by European institutions, but not only by national programs, have been to provide liquidity instruments in response to that crisis. This was mainly instruments like loans and guarantees provided to our national partners in Europe, across Europe, in order to provide assistance, immediate assistance to the SMEs. This was done, I mean, quite quickly from March, April this year, with the help of the European Commission programs. So we can say that after the first or during this first lockdown, the EU response has been quite, let's say, adequate to this situation. Again, complementing what national or member states have done in parallel. Now the question is, what next? And indeed, I mean, we are in the middle of a second wave, and we don't know how long, I mean, this will last. So the question is not how much difficulties will face the SMEs, but how big these difficulties will be. And it has been said earlier, and I only concur to this, that SMEs have been facing liquidity crisis, and they may over time face more a solvency crisis. This will be a simple result of not doing and not generating turnover, for a longer period of time. So for some SMEs, they would be in a position to resist. For others, in some more fragile sectors, this will be more difficult. So the question is, how do we provide next instruments and support to these SMEs? Knowing that two important considerations. The first one is related to the level of indebtedness of SMEs. They will be indeed facing, on top of existing indebtedness before the crisis, additional indebtedness as a result of the crisis of the first lockdown. The second, and this has been mentioned earlier as well by Alban, very rightly, that depending on the countries, there would be an expectation in 2021 of an increase of the bankruptcy growth rate of up to 30% in certain countries, 30. This is a significant increase of bankruptcy. And if this materializes, there would be indeed an important support to provide to the SMEs. Now the question is, how do we provide that support? Which instruments, which programs can we offer? In terms of instruments, and this has been also mentioned earlier, liquidity will not be enough. We need to provide more stable fund, so call that equity, quasi-equity, or other form of instruments. But we need to be able to provide certain visibility and sustainability for SMEs. So liquidity is a must, but it's not enough. So we need to work on these instruments that complement the liquidity instruments. This has been already discussed and start to be implemented in some countries and also at European level. So the question at European level is how, because indeed, I mean, I think observers have realized that in July, in the 21st of July, the decision has been to, and that was quite an historical decision, to borrow jointly the member states, I mean, using the European Commission, in order to provide assistance in the context of the recovery package. Now, the observers have also realized that certain programs that were dedicated to the support, from a European point of view, to the support of corporates and SMEs in particular, were actually not approved or approved at national level. So it means that the funds will be allocated to member states in order for them to deploy and support their own activities, corporate and SMEs, which to some extent makes sense in many areas of the economy. But in some other areas, we need, I mean, to provide more, let's say, European support. I'm thinking about two examples. The first one is more the support to the startups, or in the venture capital or private equity market, where we know that it is important, I mean, to provide support more from a sectorial point of view, expertise point of view, but less from a national point of view. So this is typically an area where we need, specifically, if we want to continue supporting the future champions in Europe, to provide assistance at European level. This is also true for other projects like what we do for hydrogen in Europe, where you have seen some program at national level being approved without any specific coordination or specific support at European level. This is another example where Europe would gain by providing European support rather than national support.
Alain, can I maybe ask one thing? You're saying the EU needs to put in place other instruments, and you mentioned type of instruments, equity or quasi-equity. Now, you rightly said that the solvency support instrument was not adopted. So, and we now have this massive recovery and resilience funds, which is implemented through national plans. And the hope is to have these sort of instruments there. But I mean, how sure is it that these instruments would be deployed? I mean, especially in those countries which need most support to avoid a solvency. I mean, the solvency and support instrument was not adopted. Is this a problem?
It may be a problem indeed for some countries. As you was also mentioned earlier, for some countries, this will not be a problem because some countries are well equipped to deploy this money. The second good news is that the money is there. So the question is rather how to support, from a European point of view, the countries where these instruments or these channels are not yet there. And this is where European institutions like European Investment Bank and European Investment Fund can help precisely, and we have already started to do so, to work together with member states to help them to provide the necessary tools and mechanism to provide and channel the money precisely to the SMEs through financial intermediaries.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, indeed. I think that's what really needs to be done, is that you be called upon to cooperate with member states within the national recovery and resilience plans, as you've done also in the context of structural funds, cohesion policy. Now, maybe let me turn now, thank you first of all, Alain, and let me turn now to Katrin Sturm. You're the Secretary General of the European Association of Guarantee Institutions. So you're working directly with those institutions across Europe, I think across the whole of Europe and beyond, that are providing guarantee schemes for the support of SMEs. Now, maybe you could a little bit explain how these institutions work, and how, in particular now in these difficult crisis times, and we heard SMEs are not only facing liquidity, but also potentially solvency problem. How are your organizations helping to thrive through the crisis? Katrin, you have a presentation. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Bert, for this kind introduction, and good morning to everyone. Let me first of all thank the European Commission, especially Christine Schreiber, and also the German EU Council Presidency, in particular Sabine Happerle, for having invited me. I think it's not only that the topic is very important that we are discussing today, but I think also the timing is perfect to do so. But let me start with a few words to the association. So the acronym AECM comes from the French name of the association. We are based in Brussels, have 48 members. They are in 30 different countries in Europe. And we have two pan-European or pan-national partners. One is REGA, it's the Association of Guarantee Institutions in Ibero-America. And the second partner is the SME Finance Forum, which belongs to the World Bank Group. What are our members doing? Our members are really there to support SMEs in getting access to finance as such, or in getting access to finance at better conditions. So if a company if an entrepreneur would like to have a loan and the bank realizes it's a good entrepreneur, it's a viable project, everything looks very good, but then there is too much risk involved, so that there is a lack of collateral, then our members jump in and they provide a guarantee, often being supported either by regions, by national states, by the European level, with a guarantee for their guarantee. So it's a classical example of risk sharing. And let me also take this occasion to warmly thank Alain for the excellent collaboration that our members and we enjoy with the European Investment Fund. Now, it's clear that this COVID-19 crisis has devastating impact on the economy, and our members are always there to support SMEs, but of course, especially in times of crisis, given that they have an anti-cyclical role to play. And let me just highlight 2 or 3 figures. If you look at the right-hand side, per 30 June, so end of June, the outstanding guarantee volume increased by 135%. 135% compared to the end of 2019. If I may draw this comparison to the economic and financial crisis, from 2008 to 2009, which was at that time the decisive year, those outstanding guarantee volumes increased by 27%. So at the time it was already like a lot, 27, but now it's 135 and the year is not over. The guarantee amount, the average guarantee amount increased from 32,000 euros in 2019 to 49,000 euros. So the average guarantee amount got a little bit higher. But as you can still imagine, it's for small and medium-sized enterprises. On this slide, you see on the left-hand side exemplary measures what our members did to correspond to the economic impact. According to the OECD, all governments used the guarantee instrument and also took decisions to facilitate the providing of guarantees in a more speedy way. I could make a presentation on the left column on its own. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them via the chat. Let me turn to the right column. This was already mentioned by my previous speakers. We have currently measures in place like tax deferrals, wage subsidies, etc., which are, of course, timely. They are limited in time. We also have measures in place that were mentioned by Alain Godard, like the Cosme and Innofin top-ups, but they were quickly oversubscribed. We have the temporary framework in place, which helped a lot for our members to provide more support, especially increasing the guarantee rate. But sooner or later, the majority of these measures will come to an end. And that was also mentioned by my previous speakers, that this will really cause then a problem for the companies, that they risk to become over-indebted. And at the end, that this will cause then an insolvency wave. In order to address this, I think the most important currently to do is to show solidarity and to work all jointly together. We can only manage with this crisis if all of us do this in a coordinated joint way. So if you look at some of the measures that from our point of view should be quickly implemented, we would like to start with InvestEU. InvestEU, like the current programs Cosme and Innofin, allow for both, for equity products and for debt products. And we have currently the situation that there are huge discrepancies between the Council and the Parliament. So we hope that those negotiations will come quickly to an end. Just to give you an example, the European Parliament would like to have 92 billion euros for the InvestEU program, whereas the Council would like to allocate 24. 92, 24. This is not a small difference. The European Parliament, it was several times mentioned that the solvency support instrument was not maintained by the Council, and the European Parliament reacted via InvestEU and would like to introduce this as another window, since not all companies have the same level of access to market financing. And as Bert already said in his question to Alban, certain member states may not have sufficient budgetary means available to provide these adequate support to the SMEs hit by the crisis. Concerning our members, they all provide guarantees for loans, but of course there are also members who have different products. For instance, BPI France in France have been providing guarantees for equity for the past 20 years. Another example is AWS from Austria. They used to provide equity and quasi-equity products with a guarantee with a counter guarantee from the multi-annual program, which ran at the EU level from 2001 to 2006. And we have other members like Zovalfin in Belgium, who are about to set up with the European Investment Fund a program under the European Guarantee Fund to use the guarantee from the European Investment Fund for subordinated loans. So I think that the perfect solution would be to have like a good mix of liquidity and solvency support measures to overcome this crisis. The liquidity issues will remain. The commercial banks started very well with this crisis, but of course they will also suffer from the insolvencies that will increase in the upcoming months. And therefore, I think that risk sharing and guarantees remain and will even become more important. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Katrin, indeed, to give us a very good overview of your organization and your partners' organization's work, mixing both liquidity and solvency measures. Now, can we now turn to our next part of this debate. And first of all, start with a testimony of a Danish small business. Can we put the video on, please?
Jeg synes ikke, min forretning gik så godt, som den skulle, og vi mangler omsætning, og jeg var også ved at køre træt i, så der skulle ske et eller andet.
Vi har fået løftet omsætningen rigtig meget, og de kunder, der kommer ind i butikken, jamen, de putter også noget andet i kurven end kun at hente deres ordre, de har bestilt online, så det er en stor succes heroppe.
Den ramte jo som slag i maven. Alt mad ude i huset, det forsvandt jo fra den ene der til den anden.
Vi fik et stigende antal henvendelser på virksomheder, som kom i kriser på grund af coronaen, som simpelthen mistede omsætning og indtjening og ikke var i stand til at håndtere deres faste ud. Kommer en stigning i antal henvendelser igen, fordi der er mange virksomheder, der får udsættelse på moms og på afgifter, og de skal afregnes, når vi kommer hen senere på året og i starten af næste år. Og hvis ikke de er i stand til at gøre det, jamen så frygter vi en bølge igen.
Så de skal tage kontakt til Early Warning. Det er jo et netværk af alle mulige forskellige mennesker, man kan få hjælp ved. Og det drejer sig om, det er at være ærlig og lægge korten på bordet. Så får du al den hjælp, du overhovedet kan ønske dig.
Very good. Thanks very much for this really interesting video, and that leads me straight to Morten Møller. You're the project manager and a network coordinator of the Early Warning Europe program, which is a flagship program project that ran between 2016 and 2019, and which through its partner institution, it's a network, is providing early intervention and counseling to SMEs which are in difficulty in order to prevent bankruptcy or to prepare a second chance. Now, and this network is to become permanent, I understand. Now, maybe I can ask you, Morten, to just explain a little bit what you've done, what the network and the partner institutions are about, knowing that this was essentially work before the crisis, and you might even have more in future. Morten.
Thank you very much. As Bert said, my name is Morten Møller. I'm the National Program Manager of Early Warning Denmark here in my home country, and I'm also the coordinator of the Early Warning Europe network. We are now 33 partners across Europe working on reaching out and assisting companies in crisis, which is more relevant than ever, sadly. We do it through hands-on management advice to the company owners, and we also build knowledge in the fields of early warning, insolvency, bankruptcy, restructuring, and second chance. So in our daily work, we see that the very basic condition for helping companies turn around a crisis situation is to reach them in time. That means when the debt has not yet gone out of hand for the companies and when there is still a chance to save them. This is all very logical, but detecting a problem and alerting the companies to take action to it will never work unless we accompany it by giving them access to a specialized advisory service. Now, why is this? Because company owners in a crisis are desperate. They know there is a problem. They've often tried everything they could already before we reach them. And then because our assistance helps them gain this overview that they need so that they can act on the problem and start turning the companies around. So when we help companies, a focus on cash flow is now in the COVID-19 situation more important than ever. So with the access to public subsidies in a lot of member states to combat the impact of COVID-19, many entrepreneurs is what we see. Many entrepreneurs have shifted their focus away from cash flow budgeting. I even heard last week, one of our regional coordinators told me that an entrepreneur had told him, what's the point of making cash flow budgeting when there are no clients? ? And of course, this correlates to the fact that loans must be repaid and postponed payments of corporate taxes and VAT will soon be due for payment. So by our help in assisting the companies to plan ahead, our members will help them face this reality so it doesn't come as a surprise at the last minute. And a way to anticipate bankruptcy in this particular situation is preventive restructuring. And I would say the faster and smoother, the more companies and jobs can we keep. at the same time, we're working in an unprecedented situation where we see entire business sectors closing down right now. So which help do these companies need? And if there is no foreseeable future in selling mink fur or catering services to music festivals, then we have to expand our focus to also look at the people behind the companies. And that means that keeping businesses afloat, which is the title of this session, should be complemented by help to surviving bankruptcy, to even help company owners in the process of filing for debt discharge. And you'd be surprised that many entrepreneurs have not even heard about the opportunity of debt discharge, and they think they have to carry around personal debt for the rest of their lives if they go bankrupt. And then moving these people in the right direction, helping them to a second start, which is what many of them dream of, but often the trauma of going through insolvency and bankruptcy is simply enough to keep them from ever wanting to restart again. In early warning Europe, these are the things we're doing all the time. So I suppose my final point of the day would be that keep in mind, the good practice is there. There is no need to invent it from scratch. It's important now that we show to the decision makers that the practice exists so that new policy can be based on what works in reality. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Morten. It's a very interesting project, of course, and I must say, of course, very timely considering the problems that we're facing now and that companies are facing now. But I mean, with your network in place and with the capacities and hands of your partners, is this enough? I mean, or are you overwhelmed with demands, with requests for support, for counseling and interventions, restructuring, etc.?
We are overwhelmed. In some countries more than others. One of our member countries has seen the inflow of companies demanding assistance actually up by 800% from last year. We are overwhelmed, but we also have a strong organization helping each other across borders. So I would say the more the decision makers can rely on our service for helping the companies, but also our knowledge on how to position new strategies, new policies. The more prepared the societies as a whole can become for this type of a crisis. Not least considering what was said in the beginning of this session, that the bankruptcy wave is still ahead of us.
Thanks, Morten. Well, let's move on from your overview of the system to one of the institutions that are actually one of the organizations that actually part of your network have worked on these counseling advisory service. And we have Irena Meterc with us. You're the head of Entrepreneurship and Technology Development Department at Spirit Slovenia. And Spirit is public agency for the support of entrepreneurship, internationalization, foreign investment in technology. So maybe you can explain to the audience how Slovenia, with your organizations, have managed to implement this early warning Europe program type of measures. Irena. I don't hear you. Is there a microphone?
Sorry. Good morning to everyone. In Slovenia, we have around 200,000 companies operating. 99% of them are SMEs. The SME sector creates almost 900,000 working places. That is 76% of all working places in Slovenia. And almost 95% of SME category present micro enterprises and people who are self-employed. They create 45% of all working places in Slovenia. Every year, there are 19,000 new companies registered. Last year, we had around 1,100 insolvency proceedings and 19,000 companies were removed from register, mostly because they declared bankruptcy. So the number is quite similar to the number of new companies registered per year. In last year, we were invited by Danish team to join the early warning community together with Ministry of Economic Development and Technology, we started to design the most suitable early warning mechanism in Slovenia. After the training in Brussels, we were determined to provide free, impartial, and confidential mentoring to companies in distress. At the beginning, we had some doubts and fears whether the model will also work in Slovenia, especially because of our cultural background. We were faced with several assumptions. Failure is a taboo in Slovenia. It's a shame to admit that you failed, so we wondered if entrepreneurs would even talk about their problems and how we will be able to identify them before it is too late. We couldn't go beyond the fact that the level of trust in public institutions is not too high. We were asking ourselves who would be the most suitable person to be trusted by entrepreneurs, so they can talk about their business issues. The strongest fears we had were about getting a volunteer mentors. We were faced by some negative convictions that the entrepreneurs are not interested in helping each other. With the help of a partner organization, Seed Slovenia, we gathered more than 20 volunteer mentors. These are individuals who have been running their business successfully for many years or have experienced failure and started all over again. Their main motives for participating in the early warning program are to use their professional and personal experiences and to share them with entrepreneurs in trouble. They are fair and diligent, and they give entrepreneurs empathy and respect. The first public announcement of the program was made on the SME conference in cooperation with Chamber of Commerce and Industry this year in June. At that time, we also started to train our regional advisors on how to identify the entrepreneurs for entering the early warning program. Our regional advisors come from different institutions, such as Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Crafts, regional development agencies, and regional business centers. We coordinate and work with this network of advisors for several years. And the task of Spirit Slovenia, our agency, is to offer them the right knowledge and competencies for the successful work within the early warning program. We believe that these local advisors are the most appropriate channel for the first identification of early warning target group. After all, they are in regular contact with their entrepreneurs on the local or regional level. Most of them have more than 15 years of experience working with local entrepreneurs and knowing their current issues. We developed the simple questionnaire for entrepreneurs and published it on our website. By completing a questionnaire, an entrepreneur expresses his interest for entering the program. The questions are quite simple and give us some basic information about entrepreneur's problem and whether he is determined to change something in his behavior. We also look at the balance sheet status and then decide whether he is appropriate for entering the program. Then our advisor invites him on the first interview for allocating the appropriate mentor. In first 2 months, more than 20 companies entered our program. Most of them are already working with a mentor. The mentoring period in most of the cases will be around 4 months. At this time, we can't talk about the actual results yet, but we are looking forward for some follow-up by the mentors in the close future. At this occasion, I would like to invite all the countries to think about establishment of early warning mechanisms. The experience of partner countries teaches us that with timely support and professional assistance, we can prevent insolvency proceedings for many companies and help revive their activities in the direction of growth and successful operations.
Thanks very much, Irena, for this overview of how you have implemented the program's elements in your country, and also thanks for your plea to all the other countries to picking up the same type of measures and to benefit from the network that Morten has put in place. So now, we have some time for questions, and I know there are questions, and I will ask Wiebke in a while maybe to put up some of the questions, to ask some of the questions, but maybe this is also a good moment to run the poll for a second time. So maybe we can put that in place, and then during the question and answers, I could maybe tell the results. Again, the same question: who do you think needs to do more to protect business from insolvency? Either it's the European Union or the member states, or it's both. So maybe you want to poll while we look at some of the questions. Wiebke, maybe you can read some of them. I saw that there were some on state aid, which is of course an important area of concern in the context of these liquidity and solvency. But your pick, Wiebke, please.
Great. So one of the things that we were noticing is that at the beginning of the conversation we were having today, also people in the audience were very much focusing on financial aid to SMEs, like looking at how we can extend temporary aid, how we can finance, provide low interest loans, loan installments, give them liquidity assistance. And then I think what we've seen is that it's not, people are saying it's not just about finance here, what we need. It's also about providing stability to SMEs, like not plan any significant changes of legislation that SMEs might have to adjust to. That SMEs need to move into the digital space, learn how to use that properly, and that they need practical support and management assistance to overcome the challenges they have now. That just adding money to the system might not always be the solution. So that's what I'm hearing from participants at this stage.
Okay, maybe indeed this question of administrative burden or of limited capacity of SMEs, which applies obviously also to the financial side of things. Alban, maybe I could ask this to you first of all. I mean, how much is this an issue? I mean, how simple are these new instruments? I mean, that are channeled, of course, through intermediaries, but is there also attention paid to making these new liquidity, but also equity type of investments simple for SMEs?
Yes. You know that in an SME there are very few people. The average in Europe is 4.3 people, and in some other countries it's much bigger. So we do need simple things. Many things have been done by European institutions and national governments or whatever. But as it has been said, and for example, Mrs. Sturm said, Katrin said, talked about solidarity. And there's one point I did forget to mention, that was late payments. And that do make a difference between Germany and southern countries like France, Italy, or Spain. And many SMEs had already the problem to finance late payments. And if we consider the new possibilities that are given by the European institutions or the national or local or regional institutions, the problem is that many things are about to be done, but the main problem is how to reach the money. That is to say, the way this liquidity is coming really in the hands of the SMEs. So that's one point. The other point is, of course, you can give much money to SMEs, but the problem is one day you have to pay back, you have to repay. And so that will be the way it is done. I mean, it has to be given, of course, basically to viable SMEs. And there's a major problem because it has been stated by Morten that there will certainly be dead SMEs on our way, and that's a major problem. But it's not only a question of money and repaying, it's a question of upgrading SMEs. And that is to say, it's about skills as well. When we talk about digitalization, it means that inside the SME, you need to have the people who can do it. But it's not only hiring new people, younger people, but it's as well upscaling, the skills of the people inside those SMEs. So I think it will be a change of mindset in all the European SMEs. And we have seen that during the first lockdown, many SMEs have moved in the digitalization in a way that nobody could think that they could do. That is to say, they've done in 2 months what was scheduled to be done in 2 years. So if we go back to money, afterwards, I think, and it has started in some countries, the problem is to see how much money in a normal, I would say, level of activity, how much money an SME can give back to repay all what has been deferred. And so this is a question of common sense. I mean, if you need a certain, how much activity will we get back? Will it be 100%, 80%, or things like that? If you ask too much money back from an SME, you kill it. So it will be a question of constant adjustment. And so it does require much more understanding between institutions and SME organizations. And that's where, I mean, the role of SME organizations has to be bigger.
Thank you, Alban. Maybe Alain, can I see with you how you see this point of SMEs lower capacity of ability to fare through a storm by being able to speak to the right people, being able to pick up the right loan, the right instruments that are there to address their problem. Is this something? I know you're with the EIF, but in the wider EIE group, which is a concern, and to also to look at the burden that is out there.
Yes, I think this is a very fair question, and I alluded to it indeed earlier. The question is not necessarily the amount of money available in the different schemes. I mean, we know that this recovery program has been quite major in size, with 700 billion. There's other programs that were mentioned also earlier, like the EGF, European Guarantee Fund, proposed by EIB to the member states, providing up to 200 billion of support. So I think money is there. There may be need for additional programs, but I think the difficulties is indeed to channel that money to the SMEs. And again, in the video that we have listened earlier, the person was complaining that the money did not reach her. And that is basically an issue. And we know why. We know why because some of these instruments are provided by banks and financial institutions that do not necessarily have the assessment of the risk that they take vis-à-vis their SMEs. They don't have necessarily a relationship related to, let's say, investments. So that makes sometimes difficult for SMEs to get that money. Now, I think a point I'd like to add to this is the opportunity that the SMEs may have. And again, we can look at the glass half empty. But there's, as we see from programs, a huge amount of money that will be allocated to the transformation of SMEs. And I know that by seeing this, I know that for many SMEs, the difficulties is not to transform, but to be able to survive. But nevertheless, digitalization is indeed quite a significant opportunity for SMEs, precisely, to turn into a more modern companies. And for that, Europe has, for example, in the context of the Recovery Fund, allocated 20% of the program to digital support. So this is something that is not negligible and will certainly help SMEs to transform and to adapt their business model to the new environment.
Thank you, Alain. Just a very quick, Morten, maybe I can still give you a quick one on how much is this now also coming your end, basically, I mean, of course, you're dealing with those companies that want to be saved, or you're even anticipating it by looking into them. But I mean, how much can you or your partners actually give all that advice that is needed now to fare through that storm?
I think we need to look at the problems affecting the companies. Many of them were running a perfectly healthy, sustainable operation before the crisis, and then the crisis came and took away their whole business foundation, the basis for their operation. We can help them with crisis management, forward planning, adjusting their organization, their operation, looking into new markets, the digital opportunities. We can do all those things. Then there are the other companies, the ones that were maybe not running a very healthy operation, but which managed to stay in business until this crisis hit. Many of those, the best service we can actually give them is to help them shut down as fast and cheap as possible, meaning before the losses accumulate, because in the end it's a snowball effect. When a company breaks down, then creditors will lose money, the public treasury will lose money, and the faster and cheaper we can do this, the more money we save for everybody. So we have to do both things.
Thanks, Morten. Yeah, it's clear that you also have to make that call that maybe it's better to close down and to restart new rather than to continue that pain. Well, we're coming slowly to an end. Maybe I can first of all give some feedback on the polling, and you've been quite similar from the results are quite similar to those at the beginning. I mean, there's only 3% that think that the EU should do more, which is already a good thing for the organizers of this SME Assembly. And it's 23% that think that member states should do more, but 73% that think both should do more. Now, in terms of, so indeed, I mean, it's a clear signal that member states should work with the EU to fare through this storm. Can I maybe now ask all of the speakers to make a very short conclusions of their speak? We heard a lot about liquidity measures, but also solvency measures. We heard about lots of money being out there, counseling being important, and restructuring and advice for those that are viable. Now, can each of you, and we only have 2 minutes to go, so really it is one sentence each. I'll start with Alban. What is your conclusion?
Well, we urge member states to provide solvency support and tailored advice for SMEs to stay afloat during this crisis and build resilience for the future.
Thanks, that's excellent. Alain.
From the liquidity crisis, we will have to address the next one, which is a solvency crisis, and possibly to anticipate for an investment crisis if we don't succeed in the later one. So I think all must be done in bold in order to support the SMEs market. Thank you.
Indeed, there's also an investment crisis looming, so the long-term prospects of growth. Thanks, Alain. Katrin, what is your conclusion?
That we definitely have to act together, and we have to build up on existing successful programs, not introducing new bureaucratic burden, that we have to be reasonable with the administrative requests that we have to the SMEs, and that we really have to work all together to bring SMEs back to the situation that they are resilient and prosperous.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a call to just do it and keep it simple and do it together. That's excellent. Morten, what is your conclusion?
My conclusion is we don't need to invent anything new. We need to look at the good practice that works in reality on the ground and not only on the drawing board.
Back to the reality, indeed. Irena, what is your conclusion?
Think about establishing early warning mechanisms and help your companies review their activities in the direction of growth and successful operations.
Well, thanks very much. That was excellent. I can really congratulate you all for your contributions and also for your excellent to-the-point conclusions. And I'd like to thank the organizers and say bye-bye and enjoy the rest of the SME Assembly. Bye-bye.